Alright, this time on Card Knock Life Plays, we're going to be checking out the Bant Spirits deck. There are two versions of Spirits decks floating around. There have really been Spirits in Modern for quite some time, but it's the Supreme Phantom that brings things back into the picture. Now, the Blue-White Spirits deck is an Aether Vial version of this deck. Green is splashed almost exclusively for Collected Company, but also for the Mana Dork so that you can curve turn 2 Spell Queller, Geist, Drogskol Captain, and whatnot. There are lots of very powerful 3-drops in this deck that are super relevant. This one is kind of a mix between a lot of the Spirit decks I've seen. A lot of people are kind of iffy about like Geist in the main. I'm trying one. It seems a little win more in some cases, but there are certain matchups that are pretty tough to win, and Geist is very good against those matchups, particularly like Tron, and so I think I like him for that reason. But the general idea here is that we are a tribal deck with some excellent disruption built into our plan already, as well as being able to pump our creatures in the air. Very difficult to block. So similar to humans, where a lot of the creatures are kind of lord-like or get benefits from having other humans in play, Spirits does that well. Mausoleum Wanderer is a great example because it gets pumped whenever you play a Spirit spell. But then on top of that, it provides some great disruption where it can force spike or mana leak an instant or sorcery spell for 0 mana. With all of the flash spirits in the deck, and as well as having Rattlechains, which gives all of your spirits flash, this becomes like a really big deal and a very effective way to deal with spells later in the game too, as compared to like the Judge's Familiar or Curse Catcher, who is always going to be one no matter what. This guy is insanely powerful. Selfless Spirit, obviously great against Wrath spells, Supreme Verdict, and whatnot. Again, if you have Rattlechains in play and you can flash in a Selfless Spirit and then prevent the Wrath from killing your creatures out of nowhere, that's very good. Spell Queller can do similar work because it can counter, effectively can exile the Supreme Verdict. Just watch out for other removal, and maybe hope you've got a Drogskol Captain on the board. Drogskol Captain is probably the best lord in any tribe because it gives a creature +1/+1 and hexproof on top of that. So having 2 Drogskol Captains on the board means that your opponent has no targets for their removal spells. The way that this deck kind of cheats on this plan is to play a couple of Phantasmal Images in the main. Now, Phantasmal Image is typically a pretty vulnerable creature, but when you've got a Drogskol Captain in play and you play a Phantasmal Image choosing Drogskol Captain, it will never be targeted in the first place, by your opponent, that is. Don't accidentally do it yourself. Try to put a Steel of the Godhead or something on it later in the game. Some decks run those. As far as the land package goes, 3 colors is usually a little tough, but you'll do some shocking and fetching, but that's just part of the game. Cavern of Souls is great, obviously. Like almost all of our creatures are spirits, but keep in mind that Phantasmal Image is not. It is an illusion while you're casting it, so you cannot use Cavern of Souls for it. Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise obviously are too, not spirits. This 4th Mana Dork should probably be another Noble Hierarch. I've got a Birds in here just because I don't have a 4th Hierarch online. It probably doesn't make a huge difference, but that Exalted trigger every once in a while matters, especially in similar matches or mirror matches where you want to be attacking with bigger flying creatures. What Supreme Phantom adds to the deck is a really versatile 2-drop, and with Mausoleum Wanderer, to be able to make your Wanderer counter spell for 2 mana as early as turn 2, that is pretty damn relevant, and really, really relevant when you're trying to go wide, obviously. So it's just that much more gas for the deck. The deck was kind of bottlenecked on 3, especially if you're playing more Geist or the Nebelgast Heralds, which is a fine card. I might consider trying those as well. So having some more valuable 2-drops in Supreme Phantom is quite relevant. Looking at the sideboard, one more thing about the main deck. The two utility lands I play are Gavony Township and Moorland Haunt. Some decks play one or the other. I'm trying one of each. I want some value, some versatility. Moorland Haunt is a tribal land. It creates spirit tokens, and if you can put a spirit token into play at instant speed, why the heck wouldn't you do it? It would improve the stats of Mausoleum Wanderer at instant speed. On your opponent's turn, you can flash in, quote-unquote flash in. You can put a creature token into play, pumping him up to a 2/2 or a 3/3 or whatever it may be after some lords, and countering a spell that they maybe didn't see coming. Also, those 1/1s are quite valuable with the 8 in kind of 9 lords with the images that you play in this deck, because they're sometimes 3/3s, 4/4s, and 5/5s for 2 mana, which is pretty darn good. A lot of control decks that go toe-to-toe, go 1-for-1 removal, have a lot of trouble with the Moorland Haunt, even if they are just 1/1 spirit tokens, because they accumulate and they deal a lot of damage over time, and then they make a top-decked Drogskol Captain or Supreme Phantom that much better because it effectively gives you +1/+1 on that attacking creature to be used that turn. You don't have to wait for your creature to untap and be able to attack to get value out of it. Also, Noble Hierarch's great with them. Gavony Township is very good if you're going wide. Once again, if you're in like a stalemate situation where you have similar flying armies across the table, or just like a green-white companies type of matchup, you're going to want to make your creatures bigger before you're ready to commit to an attack. But also, you can trick some blocks out that way too. With all of the flash in this deck and the instant speed with Collected Company, it really keeps your opponent on their toes, I should say, what you're going to do with your mana on your turn. Just about everything in this deck, in fact, everything in this deck can be cast at instant speed, except for the Mana Dorks, because of the Rattlechains allowing you to do that. So that seems very good. Okay, now going on the sideboard. Damping Sphere is just a concession to Tron. Tron is a tough matchup for the deck. Also good against Storm, obviously. I don't need to tell you much about that. Kataki is a spirit. Can you believe it? It's a dang spirit. So this is a great card against artifact decks, no doubt, but it's also a very respectable attacker. It's a 2/1 for 2, and it gets pumped by your lords. It does a lot of damage that way, and pretty much can just win the game against like Affinity if timed right. Remorseful Cleric, also another new addition from M19. The jury's kind of out on this guy. I think he's really good in Modern in general, but for the Spirits deck, I think sometimes you just want Rest in Peace more. The advantage of this being a creature that can attack and then instant speed deal with the graveyard when needed, that's great. It's also something you can get off a Collected Company or flash in when you have a Mausoleum Wanderer in play, so it can be kind of a surprise graveyard destruction. Of course, Rest in Peace is better against Delve cards like Logic Knot or Gurmag Angler and whatnot. But I'm trying to split. I think that it's worth the drawback of not being as good against the Tassigurs and things to have another creature that has flying, has an ability to sacrifice. This guy's ridiculously good against Living End, put it that way. Not that that deck is hugely popular at this point, but it's it's kind of the dream to play that guy against Living End. Stony Silence, another thing that could be another copy of Kataki. However, Stony Silence is just so good, another backbreaking card, similar to Rest in Peace in the right matchup. So I'm going to try one of each of those guys. Thalia kind of adds to the taxing element of this deck that Mausoleum Wanderer creates against like all of the decks that are going to play the Wrath spells and the Terminuses and things like that. Thalia is very good, but it also slows down the combo decks like Storm, and that's really needed when you're playing a creature deck like this. So Thalia is a respectable attacker. It's a 2-drop. It gets hit off a Collected Company. It's really all you want. Unified Will is an interesting card. Put it over here. I guess I can't. So Unified Will says counter target spell if you control more creatures than that spell's controller. Obviously, there are games where that's going to be a no-brainer. You're always going to have more creatures than Tron. When you're playing against a creature deck, this card is just completely invalid. However, you're probably going to be less likely to board in counter spells against those types of decks anyway. But I've seen people try like Ceremonious Rejections in the sideboards, negates, dispels, mana leaks, things like that. You've got Queller in the main for a counter spell, like kind of a sort of catch-all, anything under 4 CMC. Unified Will adds that extra element of counter target Karn or counter target Teferi or Jace if you want to go that route. But be careful not to overboard. If you're boarding in some non-creatures, your Collected Companies become worse. Eidolon of Rhetoric is one of my all-time favorite sideboard cards. I play it in just about every deck that has access to white and plays creature toolbox sort of elements. I would consider Coco to be that. And it's a spirit. So not only is it really powerful, but it's also really difficult to interact with when you've got a Drogskol Captain on the table. It pretty much can shut down Storm entirely. They have outs. They have like Wipe Away and Repeal and things for it. Which they will do at end of turn before going off. But if you've got Hexproof, you don't have much to worry about there. So I like that guy a lot. 1/4, great stats. I love it against Burn, too. Generally a good card. I'm seeing a lot of Burn online, so I'm trying Rhox War Monk. It's an extremely efficient 3-drop, has lifelink. It's got a 4 toughness butt, which is difficult for Burn decks to deal with. So this guy is really the bee's knees in that sort of matchup. Worship wins games. Once again, the hexproof lock with the Drogskol Captains, and even having like a Selfless Spirit in play, there's not much that your opponent can do in certain situations, short of like play a Terminus or a Settle the Wreckage or something along those lines. So you just got to be careful of that, and play Worship against decks that you don't expect to board in answers to it, which you can catch a lot of people off guard with it. Settle, obviously one-sided Wrath. You need that in mirror match type situations. You need that where your opponent is going to be playing humans and is going to go after you. Having just one of makes it difficult for them to decide whether or not they want their meddling mages around or not, and whether they want them to call a Settle the Wreckage. If they've got 4 cards in their deck committed to stopping your Wrath spell, and you've got 1 Wrath spell, I think that's a win in that situation. It's okay for it to be a dead card sometimes there, because they just played a bear. And then last but not least, Engineered Explosives, just a catch-all, right? You need this for the tokens. You need this for a bunch of Lingering Souls that are in your way. You need this for the enchantments and the, as you'll see later in this league, certain types of artifacts that make it very difficult for you to attack when your opponent has no cards in hand. So keep that in mind. Anyways, I'm excited to play this deck. I've been looking forward to playing Spirits for a long time. I never took the initiative to actually build the deck, but when Supreme Phantom came out, I didn't know that I could wait much longer for it. So here it is. Thanks for watching.